Welcome to Rock Solid, the Round Rock Business Leaders Podcast. Join your host, Bryan Eisenberg, as he explores the journeys of entrepreneurs and companies across Round Rock, Texas. From startups and nonprofits to large organizations, each guest shares their passion for doing business in this thriving community. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Rock Solid. And I'm here with Maggie Stenson, registered dietitian. I want to dive right into to the very beginning of food, which is, they say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. A lot of people don't know this, and I don't know if you know this, but it was Edward Bernays, the father of modern propaganda, who basically worked with the pork industry to get doctors to say that it was, you need to have a hearty breakfast. Is it really the most important meal of the day?
That is a good question. That actually, and how you frame that question is really helpful, and something I talk a lot with clients about is, one, that nutrition and food is so individualized, right? So when I meet with a patient and they, especially now we have so much, we always had wellness culture present, whether it was through magazines in the 90s, TV
Jack
shows.
LaLanne early in the day.
Exactly. So there's always been nutrition fads that we've had to combat with education and things like that, knowledge. So right now we have a lot of wellness culture coming through in TikTok, social media, all of those things, a lot of wellness influencers. All that to say, a lot of times when clients come into my office and they're asking about certain nutrition fads or information, I always want to frame it in the sense of what makes sense for you? And that when we think about that and individualized nutrition information and knowledge and application and interventions, we want to think, okay, what makes sense for your routine, for your schedule, for your energy output throughout the day, for your access to food. Maybe you have allergies, maybe you have to work on the relationship with food, maybe there's struggles there that we need to be considering. We want to consider all of those things. So I always say there's not a lot of just blanket statements for nutrition that apply to everyone. That being one. So if it's breakfast is the most important meal of the day, if I have a client that's struggling to get lunch in, for that month, the most important meal for them to focus on is probably lunch, right? Okay. So because that might be the thing that they're struggling to prioritize or create a balanced meal around. So that might be most important. That being one piece, it's very individualized. And two, we have to consider the source when we get nutrition information. Like you said, there's a lot of information that is funded. Right?
Yeah.
So let's take the wellness culture and social media. A lot of the influencers, if we notice, let's say if they're this is the most important thing you can do for your health and is buy the supplement that I'm getting kickbacks from, right? So we have to consider it same thing in the propaganda like you're talking about. We have to really kind of think, what is the source of this? What is the goal? Follow the money kind of is one thing I always talk about. So I want to just always be considering. So yeah, so I think we just always have to take nutrition information with a grain of salt and really look at what is the intention behind this really black and white statement that they're making, and how does this actually apply to me? And does it improve my health, or does it make me more obsessed with food, or does it shift me from focusing on the things I need to focus on? So all of those things,
Well, it's interesting you brought up obviously social media influencers, because I think yes, a lot of people are getting a lot of their nutrition advice from social media, or they think they know. Of course, we have a country full of obese people with I think it's 80% of people have some kind of metabolic issues going on. So yeah, we're definitely getting great information publicly. But what's the difference between getting that information from social media, getting it from a registered dietitian or a nutritionist, right? They're really three kind of different buckets. How would you explain that so that people really understand?
What's the difference?
Yeah.
Yes. So I would say, we have, when we think about nutrition from a professional standpoint, this always confuses people of registered dietitian versus nutritionist. The difference is with registered dietitian, you're required to have a degree in nutrition, required to complete an internship. I want to say 1,200 hours. It's been a while, so I can't remember the exact hours. A 1,200-hour internship, and then you sit for the exam, and then you have to renew and make sure you're taking CEUs related to nutrition. You have a board that's kind of managing.
So a lot more like a medical training.
Yes. So versus a general nutritionist doesn't have a lot of regulation. So if you do go to a nutritionist, just make sure you're checking to make sure they have education, and what the background is really important. But with the dietitian, you just kind of know they have a professional board monitoring them, managing them. They have this education, they have this background. So we have that knowledge, right? So that would be the difference in those two things. With when it comes to should I go to a dietitian or could I just Google this stuff, right? So I always tell people like
or ChatGPT.
or ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
So I always tell people like the information I provide you, you could probably Google a lot of it. Like you could Google what are carbs, right? I don't need to. That's not new information that's not accessible through all of the resources we have. So we know that there's that. So there's the information provided, and yes, I can package it in a way that feels more accessible and all the things. But beyond that is that we also, as a dietitian, I also provide accountability, providing that individualized care and that clinical judgment to know what information is helpful for you to really focus on and what do we need to maybe shift away from fixating on. Those are the things that really, I think, benefit seeing a dietitian outside of just Googling, reading a book. All those things are great. We want to empower people. Or social media influencers.
Or the guy from GNC.
Exactly. Or just your friend who wants to tell you how to eat.
Yeah, they found a great new supplement that helped them.
Yes. I always say it's like your aunt or something that wants to comment on everything you put in your mouth. But those things. But yes, there's so many sources of nutrition information. But having that dietitian just helps it be a little bit more individualized and have that accountability and really help you kind of dig through the weeds with that.
Yeah. If you know a little bit of my story, if you heard a couple of the podcasts, you know I've previously lost 100 pounds, and last year, July, I was a little heavier. I was a little shocked. I went for my annual blood work, and my blood glucose was up to 376. That was the day after eating all-you-can-eat sushi.
So we have a source,
So we'll talk about it. So that definitely spiked it, I'm sure, a little higher, because between my boys and I, we consumed over 30 rolls.
Yeah, as you should.
Yeah. If you're going to do it right,
right? Got to fully go in there, yeah.
But as I was going on my journey and reclaiming my health, one of the first things I did is I started wearing continuous glucose monitor, right? My nurse practitioner gave me a sample, and I started using them over the counter. And it really showed me the power of, individualization. So, for example, I'd wake up in the mornings and I used to have a protein shake. And I found out it was spiking my sugar.
Yeah.
Okay. And I tried multiple proteins, and I had nothing in my shake,
Yeah.
but it was still doing it.
Yeah.
Until I made a little tweak. I added some chia seeds finally there, and it kind of balanced things out. Why don't people understand how their foods are impacting them on a daily basis?
It's a good question. I think that there's several barriers. One, I think that there's so much information out there that we tend to kind of just shut down and just kind of, we get overwhelmed, right? I mean, I know just as human nature, we're like, there's so much, and I'm feeling almost this defeated feeling versus feeling empowered by the information. So I think that's to me, the main thing is that how information, nutrition related, is presented is not empowering. It feels defeating, right? It's like, well, if you would just do this, everything would be better. If you would just do this, everything would be better. And it's like, well, maybe not, right? Versus being like, here's what is really helpful. How can you kind of take this and apply? That being one thing from a very broad general nutrition information. Then I think we also look at from the medical world, it sounds like you had a PA or nurse practitioner that was really on top of it, or like, and providing things that really empowered you to make changes, right? And if that's not happening in the medical provider you're have access to.
And it doesn't happen in most. This was fortunately Monica McKitter is from Impact Family Wellness. It was her team.
Yeah. So it sounds like really on top of it, really helping provide individualized care. So if you're maybe going to the doctor once a year for a 15-minute check-in and they're like, oh, your cholesterol's high, you should cut back on fat. And you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, do I cut back on this? Which fat? What's good fat? What's healthy? Whatever. I don't know. All these things. Just you Google it. There's so much information. So I think that that's where we're kind of, how we're kind of getting information isn't always in a way that leads to successful behavior change,
Rock Solid is produced and recorded at Round Rock Studio. Located right here in Round Rock, our state-of-the-art studio is built for podcasters and creatives alike. We offer multiple professionally designed podcast sets, top-notch recording gear, and a full photography studio ready for any project. Whether you're launching a new podcast or upgrading your existing one, we can help with multi-camera recording, editing, and everything you need for success. Record with us at Round Rock Studio, your local podcasting partner.
There's so many directions I can take you in here, but I'm really curious. Like, we're here in the middle of Texas, right?
Yeah.
You're originally from Dallas. You've been in the Austin area for a couple of years. people who are on vegan diets and vegetarian diets, is meat healthy? Is it meat not healthy? Or again, is it individualized?
Yeah. So that, I would say, once again, individualized, which I don't say that to kind of avoid having a clear answer, but I'd say that more. I'll give examples.
People on social media are going to be very upset
they're gonna,
that you're
tell
not
me exactly
answering.
what to do. I need a clear black and white answer and that's what I always tell my clients. I'm like, we really love having like a one size fits all clear boundaries around food, which then can feel restrictive. So with, let's say, vegan, vegetarian, that's a really good example. So let's say for my clients, I work with a lot of eating disorders. So a lot of times cutting out whole food groups like that is really harmful on their mental and emotional health, right? So it can feel really tied to the eating disorder. So in my clients, obviously we'll explore like if this feels like an ethical motivation, whatever that might be. But if we're struggling with malnutrition, we're trying to make sure that you're getting all your micronutrients in and your protein in to make sure your body is nourished. That's a concern. And from the mental, emotional side, is this the eating disorder driving this? So that would be kind of typically where I work on it. But let's say for general population and you maybe don't have a history of eating disorders or not predisposed to that. Yes, like let's say you're someone who is, the things you have to be really intentional about are like protein, iron, B12, things like that. So if you're someone that is able to take that intentionality around those things, sure, that might work for you. But if you're someone who might not have the time or capacity to do that, or maybe have higher protein needs, like if you're doing a lot of strength training, it might not be best for you, right? So that's where we have that nuance and have to have the, but like you said, I'm sure people are like, just tell me, do I do it or do I not? Yeah.
So we're still okay with meat, I think.
I'm a fan. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. My mom, I mean, God bless her soul. She, when I first had my first kid, she told me, said, your job as a parent is to screw your kids up as little as possible.
Yes.
With an acknowledgement that we're going to mess up our kids.
Yeah.
And, going back, thinking about my mom, thinking about, my brother as well, right? We definitely had relationships with food, with her. She was in the kitchen, a lot. She was always on a diet, always watching things. Why is it that so many parents potentially screw up their kids' relationships with foods?
Oh, yeah. That's a big part of it. So that tends to be one of the, when I have a client in my office, that tends to be one of the first areas we really talk about is how was food, how was body image discussed growing up, right? So like you said, if your parent was always on a diet, then you grew up very much in a diet culture mindset. Or if your parent was always complaining about their own weight or telling you like gaining weight is like the scariest thing ever, or they portrayed that or promoted that in the way that they talked about their own body, then you will grow up with this fear of gaining weight, right? Or this idea that I always have to be on a diet or I'm failing. So oftentimes when we think about kids, they're so black and white in how they think, even more than us as adults, right? So they take everything so literally. So a lot of times when clients will say like, I'm really scared of carbs, I'm like, okay, tell me where that kind of originated. What was that? Where did that fear really start?
Yeah, and especially over the last few years, that's been so much more.
Like such a big piece. And they can point to like when I was 8 years old, my mom told me that carbs are the worst thing in the world. And now 30 years later, I still am so scared of carbs and I can remember that moment, right? So I think remembering like your kids are hearing everything and they're interpreting it in the most literal way. So if you're like, oh, I can't eat carbs, you say it over and over again, they're going to think, oh, I can't eat carbs, right? So that being one thing. And when we think about eating disorders, there's kind of a 3-piece kind of etiology to it: genetic predisposition, environment, so that would be, parental things like that, and then personality type. So oftentimes certain personality types may be more type A.
Very competitive, yeah.
More perfectionistic, yeah. So
I mean, I wish I had my dad's genetic. My dad couldn't put on weight until like 20 years, after marriage. He was just a toothpick. Never, like, he can eat 3 meals, one after another, and nothing. But no, we didn't get his
change.
Genes. We got mom's family genes.
He kept those to himself.
He was selfish that way.
That's so funny. But yes, exactly. Like, we have different genetic predispositions, different personality types, but I do think so often, like you said, I always I remind parents, I'm like, especially if they've child that's been diagnosed with an eating disorder, I'm like, this is like learning a new language, like figuring out how to speak without triggering the eating disorder, learning how to talk about food in a new way. It's a whole new language. So I'm like, give yourself grace. It's going to take time to learn. And let's do the least damage as we can, least amount of damage as possible. Right?
See, Mom was right.
Yes, Mom was on it.
Okay. So coming back to something you just said, certain personality types, like a type A disorder, you often see this in, athletes, especially women athletes, have, huge issues with this. Some male athletes do as well. Mm-hmm. And then obviously the genetics. Would you, as a parent, worried about their kids potentially, developing an eating disorder, are those some of the early things you look for to kind of educate parents around that? Yeah,
so I definitely consider, let's say if they're in a certain sport, especially certain sports tend to be more focused on weight. Obviously, we think about like cheer, gymnastics, wrestling. Exactly.
Yep.
I have a couple clients have been, even like rowing. I think there's a certain position that has like a weight limit and things like that you just don't even really think about, right? So I always consider what sport are they in and just talk about making sure we're talking with the coach. Like, I don't want you to talk to my child about their weight. I don't want you to talk about food with my child. Whatever boundaries you need to set, go ahead and set those boundaries. The other thing I always say as a protective measure is keeping a very neutral language around food. So we can view food as, we can still speak to nutritional benefits of food without demonizing or kind of having a moral tie to food. So versus saying like, oh my gosh, this cake is so bad, like we can't have this, we can say like, hey, cake is great, it provides satisfaction, it provides us with energy, it's a big social piece, it's a lot of traditions around it, and we're going to make sure we have our dinner too, because we got to get our fiber in, we need to get some protein, and looking at food in a positive way and helping educate them in a really neutral way versus demonizing certain foods or encouraging a restrictive mindset. Yeah.
From your background, you've really focused in on a lot of the eating disorders.
Yeah.
How is it that most people find you? Like, because you talked earlier, a lot of your business is through referrals. Where do they first find that problem and then seek you out as a solution?
Yes, there's probably a couple, I guess, two ways. One would be referrals. So typically my referrals come from therapists. They might have already gotten connected with a therapist or a doctor. And then they're kind of to the point where they're realizing, like, oh yeah, this is maybe a bigger issue than I thought, or maybe have been diagnosed. That's a big piece. Or if they're coming out of treatment and need to establish an outpatient team, that would be where I would get a lot of those referrals. The second referrals, and the other piece being, usually people will find me online, and two things I tend to be kind of seeking out. One, obviously, eating disorder support. That's a major part of my clientele. Or two, if they're wanting kind of more of a non-diet, intuitive eating, more kind of self-compassion focused approach to food. So let's say they have high cholesterol or been diagnosed with diabetes or prediabetes and want to have nutrition education, but in a more non-diet approach. That would be how they'd find me. So usually Google, internet search and finding me through that. And like, usually I always want to make sure when I have clients reach out, like we touch base over the phone. I always offer that so they can just see if it's the personality types fit, if they like talking to me, because sometimes it just might not be a good fit, and that's totally fine, right? So yeah, things like that.
And you offer more than just the counseling and nutrition planning. Can you talk a little bit more? Because you do meal planning too, right?
Yeah, so usually how that works.
Or meal prep?
Yeah, so I do a lot of nutrition counseling, so it's sessions, so about 45, 50-minute sessions. And we can also work on another service offers like meal support. So let's say if someone's really struggling to have complete meals or do meals on their own, or they're maybe need a little bit more additional support at certain meal times, we can do meal support as well. So that's another option. And then we can also I will provide some type of meal structure or meal plan for them for the week to really focus on. So usually that's going to be attached to the sessions, but helps to just, once again, kind of empower them to know kind of, okay, here's my expectations. Here's what I can focus on. Here's a realistic plan, right? So, yeah.
There's a lot of energy out in the marketplace today to make
Yeah.
changes. We're seeing some of the food dyes being banned.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big ones, obviously, is with Coca-Cola. I mean, we all have Mexican Coke with the cane sugar versus the traditional Coke that we get here, which is with fructose. Is there a taste difference, right? And that people will claim for sure, but nutritionally, sugars are sugars, aren't they?
Yeah. And there's some like chemical differences maybe in how they're absorbed or processed, but at the end of the day, it's like glucose is glucose, right? Your body's like, oh no, like not this one. Like I didn't ask for this, right?
Yeah, different flavor.
So, like how dare you?
Right.
So,
in other words, vanilla ice cream and chocolate ice cream, they're both ice creams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be a huge difference in kind of how your body. There's some like very tedious chemical breakdown, absorption things or processes that might occur. And to me, I always say, like, let's take soda, for example. Once again, if we were to individualize it, so if you might struggle, like, let's say we're kind of focusing on blood sugar, that might be something we consider when we think about sugar-sweetened beverages. That might be a consideration. Or if you're someone that, like a lot of my clients, it might just be like, I'm avoiding all sugar-sweetened beverages to adapt to my eating disorder.
Or
cater to it.
artificially sweetened as well, because those do the same thing to the body as real sugar. It's just,
and then it messes with your gut a lot of times, and you just feel kind of funky. So, I think at the end of the day, it's really just figuring out what's best for you, and if that's makes sense for you, and you feel what feels best for your body, and taking the best care of it.
So, if you had to choose a Coke, which would you prefer?
I would probably. I'm truly not a big soda person. I would probably get regularly sweetened soda because I just think it tastes better.
Okay.
And I just think like you said, we're going to have a similar some insulin release reaction with the sugar, non-nutritious sweeteners. So I would probably just go for regular soda.
I want to kind of one more question before we kind of wrap up, but one of the big trends lately is these healthy sodas like the Olipops and the Poppy, where they're putting these prebiotics into soda.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
I know that there was some. I might be remembering this wrong.
Sold for over $1 billion.
Yeah, it's doing very well. I feel like there was like some scandal where it was like the label is not which can happen, and that's a hard thing too. I think sometimes with supplements or things like that, you have to make sure that these things are third party tested because it's not an expected thing or a regulated area. So always making sure that something is third party tested if they're promoting these benefits. I say, okay, let's say you add in prebiotics. You could also add that in through a variety of foods in your diet, and that could be helpful. It could hurt. It could help. It probably won't hurt. That's always my thing. Like, sure, if you enjoy them, they taste good, and it's another way to get prebiotics. But
it's probably not going to fix your gut health.
It's not. No. There's so many other pieces to it. Like, that alone is not going to fix your gut health. That is a piece to maybe one step we could take in addition to other ones. So, yes, that's a great way to put it.
So you moved here from Dallas. You've been here a couple of years. What's been your favorite thing about the Round Rock and Georgetown area? I know you're around Williamson County.
Yeah, we love it. So we kind of randomly, my husband got a job in Leander, so we were looking in the area, and we happened to get a place in this area, and we just fell in love with it. And I was like, we're not leaving. And I would say the things that we love about it most, I think there's just a lot of personality.
Yep.
There's a lot of great restaurants. You have great downtowns you can go to, and they have really cute kind of unique places that you wouldn't get anywhere else, right? So I think that's a big part of it. And there's something kind of a calmness to this area. I have a friend that lives in Austin. She came down to see us, and she was like, oh my
the energy level's different.
I feel so regulated, like driving over here. Like it's so much calmer. Like,
and there's parking. I
don't have to worry about parking. I'll drive to Austin, and I have an office in Austin on Thursday. So when I drive there, I'm like, whew.
Why do you do that to yourself?
I know. Why do I? Every time I'm like, should I not? So it's just a calmness, and I feel like people are just nice here. We've had a really good experience with, like, our neighbors are always super nice. Who just So it's just a good. It just has kind of a small town feel, I would say.
I know there's a whole bunch of other questions I wanted to ask you about, your journey into being a solo practitioner and, going from a group office to that. We're not going to have time to get through all of that. But if people have additional questions, want to learn more about your journey, learn more about, being the woman entrepreneur that you are, what's the best way that they can find you and reach you?
Yes, I would say we have our Instagram account, which is a great way to just follow us for updates. Then I would say email or phone number are best. So you can call the number. Email, I usually check that pretty regularly and respond pretty quickly. So if you ever have questions about business, especially for dietitians, I'm very passionate about them accessing, how to provide that service and really market yourself in a way that makes sense and promotes what you can provide. So always really passionate about that. So if they're wanting to know on that end, shoot me an email. We can set up a phone call and coffee, Zoom, whatever. And then from the client perspective, I would say email, phone number, and they can also schedule online. I know I always joke, a lot of my Gen Z college kids don't like to call. So they're like, let me just schedule online. I don't have to talk to anyone. I'm like, great. So rip the Band-Aid off. So that's a great way to get access to me. So yeah, those probably being the best ways.
Awesome, Maggie. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.